Welcome into Kicking the Rear podcast, episode 2, where we dive into the real estate investment review. Today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing the BRRRR book, which of course stands for Buy, Rehab, Rent, Refi, and Repeat. This book is by David Greene, and he is the current host of Bigger Pockets podcast, the number one podcast on real estate investing. And, I think this book, if it could have a higher rating than 10 out of 10, I would give it, because this book was so chock full of useful information for anybody in the real estate investing game right now. I think as a beginner, it's great. If you're been doing this a while, it still has a lot of good information that you can come back to. And even if you're a pro, I'm sure there's things you can learn from David here, just because he's been in the game a while now and he knows his way around. Without further ado, I'd like to get into it. I'd like to dig into the key takeaways and key points of this book. David Greene talks so frequently about a lot of these principles on the podcast, and he really drills this home. If you've ever thought what way works better for you to real estate invest, look no further than the BRRRR method. At the very end of the book, he describes how everyone he knows uses a variation or the principles of this method in their career. So please pay attention. It's a very thorough book. There's about 300 or so pages, but every single chapter, every single section, there's something you could pull away from. So I'm going to go through the key points of each chapter just to not leave anything behind, because I think it's so comprehensive. I just like to touch on everything. I did do some page breaks here just to make it a little bit better so I don't miss anything. We'll go ahead and just dig in. So he says the BRRRR model outperforms traditional models in every relevant statistical category. There's two ways you can add value to a property. You buy at a low price, you're buying the equity, or you add value through the rehab process. So you build, you force equity, sweat equity. The BRRRR method increases your ROI, return on investment, by lowering the investment basis left in the deal. BRRRR builds wealth faster by increasing the velocity of your money. Love that term. He talks about it all the time in the podcast. Ken McElroy does a great job of talking about that too. But in the book, he actually goes into what does the velocity of your money mean and how can you leverage it. BRRRR increases efficiency by returning more of your capital to you and maximizing the leverage. Again, mastering each element of BRRRR will make you an overall better investor in general. Talking about ROI again versus in a scenario, he uses a guy named Mike and Tom. He uses just a realistic example of like doing a very conservative method versus an aggressive BRRRR method. And then what that difference would translate into the difference in their portfolios over a period of time. Going into the next section, just really powerful stuff. So goes into buy right criteria. Buying right gives you the option to flip a property, hold it. Options allow you to keep from making ill-informed decisions. He talks about the 3 different types of distress. This is good if you are looking at being a wholesaler. He goes into market distress, personal distress, property distress, and most fixer-upper properties will be found by targeting property distress. If a property will rent for 1% of the purchase price every month, it's likely to cash flow. That's the golden rule, the 1% rule. I love that he talked about that. I started looking for deals in my area like that as well, just using that methodology. And it really helps narrow down your search criteria if you can find a purchase price that will rent out for 1% of the purchase price. And then he goes into If you're all in 75% of the ARV after repair value, you'll likely recover 100% of your capital. Multifamily properties are valued based on their net operating income and the capitalization rate of the area. It goes into that and what that means. You improve their value by improving their net operating income. Single family homes are value based on comparable sales in the surrounding area. You improve those values by improving the desirability and the condition of the property. My three main criteria for buying property, according to David Greene, he says equity in the home, positive cash flow, and then no headaches or bad neighborhoods. I distinctly remember on his podcast him talking about a scenario of a bad neighborhood, and maybe Ken too talked about this, where you buy in a bad neighborhood and like fighting out the gangs or the drug activity when you're evicting people. It just gets it gets to be a big headache. So he's saying avoid those bad neighborhoods. You know them when you see them. He talks about there's 5 inputs that go into analyzing most deals. You have the rent, mortgage amount, tax, insurance, property management. He goes into the core 4. So making your core team of deal finders, lenders, contractors, and property managers. He uses the term to describe that as rock stars, no rock stars. So you get in touch with one rock star lender, contractor, realtor, whatever, and they'll help you find the next one. You build your core 4 team up of those people, and you'll be in good shape. Talks about there's 3 numbers you must be able to crunch to know if a property is going to make money. That's your acquisition cost. So that's your price to buy, your rehab cost, and then determining your after repair value. He says cash is king. If you can put together a cash offer or its equivalent, you'll be much stronger than competing offers. He actually talks about, like, if you don't even have the cash, there's ways you can get the cash to make it an all cash offer and then refinance it later. And I believe he's specifically talking about hard money lenders. Says look for properties that require a cash offer. You'll find better deals by eliminating your competition. So people that can't do the all cash offers, you're less likely to be in a bidding war. All right, moving on. So much dense, great material in here. I'm just so happy that I found this book by their recommendation on the podcast. Talks about using multiple agents to find you deals. Using agents on large successful teams is important. You call the team leads, ask who their top talent is working for them and who of them works for investors. Find agents through your core 4 that we talked about. He gives his Bigger Pockets community a shout out, finding agents through their community, using wholesalers to bring you deals or become the wholesaler, use direct mail, professional networking, personal networking, auctions, driving for dollars, bird dogs to help you find deals. He talks about some really cool search engine options too for that, which are kind of like tertiary ways of finding money through connecting with people. Let's move on to the next section. Just again, I couldn't stop reading this when I started it, and then I've actually had to reread certain sections just because I was so like impressed with how comprehensive they were with real-time examples, real-world examples, what David's done in the past that's led to some of his successes. You need to have a rockstar contractor. You need to use the leverage to amplify your results. Who on your team can help you with the things you need done. Make top priorities your actual top priority. Don't waste time on your unimportant tasks. Memorizing what talent looks like. Find team members of the core 4 that invest as well, because if they're investing, they're likely to have more interest in your bottom line and what you're trying to do, and it's a better fit. Finding team members of your core 4 in that space is very important, but bringing value in the relationship is even more important. I was listening actually to the podcast this morning on Ken's podcast, and this 20-year-old kid was talking about providing value, and that's like the most important lesson he learned early in his career, and he's a wholesaler. And that spoke to me because If you're bringing value to people, that's how you get them to provide value to you. You don't just like get to ask really awesome, successful people, hey, can you mentor me? Like, no, you have to bring them something, either your time or your help or expertise on something that maybe they don't have time for. And so that's something I think is great to leverage. If you can provide value to somebody, that's how you ask them for help. Use itemized bids with contractors. Oh, wow. I just used this actually in my first deal. So like, you get the contractor to provide you a bid for the project you're doing. You want to have a scope of the work, the quantity, the cost, and the timeline and the time frame clearly communicated on the bid. And he talks about specifically how you can have them estimate the time, how long it takes to do the project, and you try to get them to be as honest as possible. Say, like, hey, this is not, I'm not on, I want to make sure that you can get the work done when you think you can get it done, not necessarily on my time frame. Is this an average amount of time it takes you? Great. Okay. Are you sure? And if you're sure, okay, well, if you get it done, I'm actually going to give you an extra week to get it done, and I'll give you 5% bonus of the total cost of the project. And if you don't get it done on time, we'll subtract 5% of the total cost of the project. So I like how he incorporated that. I literally used that on my bids. And I had some headaches to go through, and I learned a lot from it. But certainly that principle he talked about helped me a lot in my negotiations. Talks about common rehab hacks you can get into, like bathrooms and higher end materials. I used that for our bathrooms. That concept was very intelligent. Bathrooms are really small. So he talks about like, hey, go for the higher end material if it looks better and it's going to last longer and it's a long-term hold. Like, invest in better materials, because then it's a lot. It's a better investment at the end of the day. He says use investor-friendly contractors, so people that understand what it takes to be a property investor, and they know certain, I don't want to say shortcuts, but they know different ways to price things more competitively for you, so that they're advocating for you as the contractor, and they're more likely to have a budget-friendly mindset with you, which translates to more work for them, right? So that's why he brings it up, and he goes into detail about it. I took a lot of information out of that section. That was my favorite section, was him talking about contractors. Spend the bulk of your rehab budget on the kitchen and bathrooms when possible. Like I said before, he goes really deep into that and why. Next section, how you can add square footage to increase the value of the home, taking dead spaces that are unusable, and putting money into those spaces, adding bedrooms and bathrooms, cheap labor, not skilled when the opportunity presents itself, covering eyesores in your yard with like mulch on a resale. Talks about thinking long-term and durable when choosing flooring on a fixer-upper or one of these BRRRR properties. Replace roofs before the refinance to cover and recover a lot of your investment costs, capital. He says never pay a contractor for the entire job up front. I've heard some horror stories just in my own neck of the woods here in Tennessee about that. Paying people up front is never a good idea. You bid the project, you pay them for maybe materials and a down payment, 10%, and then the remaining payment plan is kind of up to you and the contractor, but never paying the whole job up front, because they could leave a job, they have no incentive to get it done, or maybe they take forever to get it done. So using a team member to check on the progress of your rehab, that's helpful. Time management, paying for materials yourself the first time you use a contractor to be sure you aren't overpaying. Literally, I just did this, and the one thing I trusted a local contractor with, they did not buy the correct materials. So that was a good lesson I learned from that. Let's continue on here. So he talks about some resources that they use, preliminary rent estimates. You can go on rentometer.com. I found that pretty useful, actually. I think it's a paid service after the first 3, maybe 4 uses. But the more deals I evaluate, I think I'm going to use something like that just because it seems pretty accurate, and a lot of the Bigger Pockets community uses it. Get more accurate rental estimates from property managers as well. So, if you have relationships with property managers or you know them, you can get that from them. Look for an area with growing employment opportunities. Talks about nurses and hospitals. Buying near hospitals is a good play. Talking about buying near great schools and avoiding those bad neighborhoods. Knowing the days on market in the area you're investing in. Shorter the days on market, the hotter the market. Seems like common sense, but as of August here, the market softening that's occurring, or at least the perceived market softening. If you see a home that's on the market longer, it's maybe your opportunity to leverage the negotiations are better. I think that's really awesome. David talks about it weekly on his podcast. Using Craigslist for rental comparables. I mean, you could do that for sure. I haven't had much experience doing that myself. Look for signs of construction downtown. He kind of talks about some of the construction sites in more urban areas. There's some benefits to knowing what to look for there. Buying in the path of progress. So again, talking about areas that are under construction that are developing and starting to get more growth patterns and migration patterns. Look for barriers to entry, geographic, economic barriers. Let's push on here. Having your property manager notify you 2 months prior to your property's lease ending. It's great advice just to see what areas you need to get the property ready for when you turn it. Buying near hospitals again, buying near good schools. We talked about that. Knowing the pros and cons of self-management versus professional management. He really goes into that, and specifically how much time you have is the most important determining factor of that, and maybe the cost benefit ratio. Learning how to find and interview property managers. So if you do intend on hiring a property manager, he gives you a comprehensive questionnaire of questions you can ask. I thought this was really great, both to when I hire a property manager, or me being my own property manager, or my wife being a property manager. We can ask ourselves these questions, to keep ourselves organized and professional. In the buying process, finding your lender first, having a good relationship with your lender, getting pre-approved. I mean, this comes up a lot in my own space professionally. I get people pre-approved all the time, and I can't tell you just how many people are both aware and unaware of their purchase price limits, credit histories, usable income versus unusable income. I mean, you name it, people are aware of it or they're not. So it's just good to get pre-approved. And knowing the lender's seasoning period, he talks about that and why that's important. From what I recall from that section, it's important to know the seasoning period, because if you do a project for a BRRRR or a cash out refi on a home, the lender might have stipulations against that. So you want to be aware of your lender's criteria before you close on the loan. You want to ask your lender all about the closing costs. There's a lot of cool closing cost credits you can do on a purchase. Maybe that it doesn't apply as much to a BRRRR, but there definitely are closing costs you can sometimes get waived or included. Oh, he talks a lot about this referral process. So any particular core four group you want to impress, you got to send them referrals, especially lenders. So, if you want a good relationship with a lender, I think that's a great way to do that. Send them referrals, because we like referrals. As a lender, I love getting repeat business and referrals. And then knowing the lending institution's appetite for residential loans. If it's a big bank and they have an appetite for traditional loans, FHA loans, portfolio loans, it's good to know. But maybe they don't do certain types of loans like 203K loans, or maybe they don't do portfolio, or maybe they don't do physician loans, doctor loans. So you want to know what the lender is willing and unwilling to do based on their risk tolerance. He talks about the difference between loan to value and LTV and LTC. A lot of lending jargon in here. So he goes into specifically what all that means, but loan to value is a common term in the lending space. What the loan is to what the value of the property is. There's several types of loans. I just mentioned several of them: the conventional FHA, VA, for veterans, jumbo, portfolio, hard money loans. He goes into private financing, owner financing, home equity lines of credit, 80-10-10 loans. I actually hadn't heard of 80-10-10 before, so that was kind of cool that he went into that. Again, he's just hammering this point. BRRRR maximizes your ability to leverage. Real estate investing requires three things. You need money, knowledge, and hustle. If you don't have all of those, then you got to find somebody who does know the ones you're missing. Real estate's a hedge against inflation. All these podcasters talk about it. All the educated podcasters talk about real estate being a good hedge against inflation. And the more I'm in this space, the more I'm seeing the value of that with what's going on in our country with inflation. Everybody's impacted by it to some degree and has some level of awareness. If you're getting gas, you know what inflation is. If you've been to the grocery store, you know what I'm talking about. Opportunity cost is the price you pay for missing out on opportunity because you chose something else. Talks about selling a property is a lot more expensive than people realize. So I believe he goes into tax deferred options there a little bit. Refinancing a property is tax free, so why not do it? Successful BRRRR can pay you to own the property. A few more sections here I just want to bring up. He talks about the 4 E's of success as our efficiency, effectiveness, expeditiousness, and employability. The Pareto Principle. Oh, this was so cool. It states that 20% of your effort leads to 80% of your results. And he talks about specific examples where that's important. But if you've ever listened to the Bigger Pockets podcast, or anybody that knows anything about anything, you might have heard this principle before. So if you know that 20% of your effort leads to 80% of your results, then you need to focus on that 20% effort. Repetition creates mastery. Persistence is a key to success. He talks about using funnels to locate talent. Talent draws more talent, and then stick to your 20% in that Pareto principle. Couple more here, and then real estate is a get rich slow game. So, just again, a lot of these gurus that are talking about different ways that maximize and profit from real estate. A lot of them make it seem like it's get rich quick, and it's not. Sharpen your skills before you begin for better results. Systems provide opportunities. Build your network through repeat business. I think our network is really comprehensive with our repeat business. We get repeat referrals, and he talks about how that works in the investing space. Systems help you master the 5 elements of BRRRR. Stay at top of mind stay top of mind to get deals first. You must be at the top of everybody's mind. Compound interest. I love that he talks about compound interest. Ed Milet talks about compounding. And then lastly, investing at scale gives you a competitive advantage. Equity will not keep you safe in the case of a market correction. So cash flow and reserves will. BRRRR is not necessarily any riskier than the traditional model of investing. BRRRR is not only for fixer-uppers. BRRRR can work even if you buy with financing, even if the appraisal comes in lower. In the BRRRR method, the model is still more efficient than the traditional method. Well, that's it today, guys, for episode 2, reviewing the book by Rehab Rent Refinance Repeat by David Greene. Just again, a big shout out to you, David Greene, on the Bigger Pockets podcast. Thanks for writing this book. I highly recommend it to anybody in the real estate investing world. Please buy this book if you want to learn something tangible that's going to save you a lot of capital and time and money and effort. Looking forward to next week. I'm really enjoying this podcast, and I hope you guys are too. If you like what you heard today, please like and subscribe, and I will continue to provide comprehensive book review content as well as market updates, things of that nature, and my journey as I delve into the real estate investing world. See you next time.